Hello everybody, it is The Worm, and I'm back for some more Raging Loop today. Last time we finished off the Revelation mode, and in retrospect, I am pleased that I did it. I think an argument could be made for something like doing a whole playthrough again, just so you get the context better. And, I think that would be a worthwhile endeavor. But speaking for myself here, I have a tendency to, well, I guess it's the opposite. I don't have the tendency to replay story games all that much. I don't know if that's weird, if that's just something, that I do or many other people do. I'm not sure, but for me, I tend to, once I play through a game that it's a big story and everything, and I'm finished with it, I really feel that I'm done. I don't need to redo it. And the only time I would ever watch or play, it wouldn't be play, it'd be watch the story again. Usually it'd be if it was for a Let's Play or something. I play through a game on my own, then I want to go see what other people's thoughts or reactions to the game I played, what they are. So I'm comfortable with what I did, which is to just sort of speed through it just to see the Revelation scenes. But I do think it would be worthwhile to, if I ever did that, it would have to be something like wait a year or two or whoever knows how long, so that I could so it's not just the same thing again. I would be reminded about the whole game and not have to repeat it so quickly. But otherwise, that was that. Some pretty funny moments and some revealing moments. And now we're moving on to the extra screen, and so we have 5 extra stories here that we're going to go through. Now, I have no idea how long these are going to be, so I'm not sure if I can say I'm going to be doing 2 at a time or, whatever, but I guess we'll find out. So let's just start with the one up here. Huntress versus Bear. I've just realized they all have verses in the title here. Okay, Huntress vs. Bear, illusion comedy. The land of the Great North brings with it a new trial, a fight with a new god. The bizarre adventure of an unfunny hero in Swindler. Okay, don't know what that means. Let's find out.
参ったな。
Oh, hello, Haruaki.
参りましたね。
And Chiemi.
僕こと房石春明と彼女芹沢千恵美は参っていた。
わあ、物書きにあるまじきクソみたいな表現。
ちょっと待ってほしい。美女はクソとか言うべきではない。
美女？イエーイ！周囲に誰もいないからってキャッキャフフしてる場合じゃなくない？
She was the only one flirting here, but anyway. Yeah, the fact that there was no one around us was actually risky to us. When I'd gotten lost in the Kachihara area, Mount Suranashi, otherwise known as Shinai-san, but that wouldn't last much longer, I felt like I was in a lot of danger. I don't think I read that very well. When I'd gotten lost on the Kachihara area, Mount Suranashi, I felt I was in a lot of danger. But this time, the danger was completely different. First, this wasn't a mountain, but an endless plain, with an endless forest on an endless road. Everything was endless. As we talked about whether this was really Japan and whether the land was testing us, we'd gotten lost on a forest road. Naturally, there was no reception here. There was nothing magical, though. We were just too far from civilization. And, well, my bike was broken. The engine had made an ominous noise and stopped providing power properly. It felt dangerous, so I stopped driving, and it felt completely silent. We were stuck in the middle of Mother Nature. How terrifying. This was Hokkaido, the northernmost part of Japan. It was an autonomous region and an island with a surface area 40 times bigger than Tokyo. It was the breadbasket of Japan and a mecca of agriculture, forestry, and fishing. Why were we here, you wonder? On a whim, of course. Let's go as far away as possible. You got it. And that was all she wrote. We'd been riding my bike ever since Shammy infiltrated my home and workplace. We went up north and took a ferry in Sendai to Hokkaido. While being jostled around by the boat for a whole day, I did consider whether going as far away as possible was a good idea. But the difference in air and scenery we found once we disembarked swept all those doubts away. This was definitely a special place. I could totally understand why so many people insisted on spending money and time going on bike trips to Hokkaido. The experience of escaping the heat of Honshu and going through a pleasant open space full of life was precious. Naturally, the trip was great up until this happened, but we were now at a significant risk of changing our minds.
しかし僕はこんなこともあろうかと整備の勉強をしているのである。簡単な道具も積んであるし。
おお、そんなこと言ってたね。前はあんなに頼りなかったのに見違えるようでちえみさん嬉しい。
いかん。これは修理不能だ。
あなたは一瞬で女子を幻滅させる名人か。
いや違うんだって。ほら、ここ見て。
うわ、パックリいってんじゃん。
しかもほら、液が。
びちゃびちゃじゃん。
それでもう息が上がっちゃって。
このピッチマシンめ。
分かってやってたのか。
ちえみのエロ対応力を舐めちゃダメっす。いや、冗談はともかく。何これすごい故障じゃん。どっかぶつけたの？
The tube providing coolant had completely fallen off. Hell, the metal parts supporting it were destroyed. I had no memory of hitting something. It wasn't bent in any way, and the damage was very clean.
初期不良かも。
うわぁ、最悪。新車なのに。
しかしまあ、起きてること自体はそう難しいことじゃないんだ。
We'd lost the coolant and the engine had overheated. That was that. Unfortunately, I couldn't connect this pipe properly, but I could just barely fix it with the duct tape I had. For now, if I cooled off the engine and found some water nearby to replace the coolant, we could continue going even if the water leaked.
というわけなんだけど、水の容器になるものってあるかな？
あるある。
Hokkaido was a long trip, so we didn't come completely unprepared. There were some plastic containers on the bike that made it look pretty uncool, and Shemi had a rucksack on her. They had some food and clothing and for colder climates inside, and one of them had two empty 2-liter plastic bottles. It was pretty hot yesterday, so we emptied the sports drinks inside and just kept them with us. It was cloudy and chilly today. It was better than blazing heat, but that caused me to forget to get some water.
よし。とりあえずバイクは路肩に止めて、水を手に入れよう。漏れる分を都度補給しつつ、次の町にたどり着いて修理。
それが一番確実か。でも、水ってどこで手に入れる？
地図によると、こっちの林を突っ切ると川がある。そこまで行ければなんとか。
迷わない？
1キロほど踏み込むけど大丈夫でしょう。最悪、川沿いに歩けば、何キロか先だけど、この橋のところでこの道に合流できる。
危なくない？
どんな川かわからないけど、危なそうなら近づかないでおこう。最悪、何十キロか歩けば人里にはつけるんだし。いかがか？この計画。
まあ、いいんじゃないかな。
After that incident, we'd become a bit more careful than before. Why? Well, because we only had one life and no resets. both Chimmy and I were the kind. Both Chimmy and I were. Both Chimmy and I were the kind of push. Pardon me. Both Chimmy and I were the kind to push ourselves a bit too hard, so situations like this could often endanger our lives. Thus, we would casually, but with certainty, focus on safety. I was careful not to drive dangerously, and Chimmy was learning a lot about such trips from the handbooks she'd brought along the way. For a couple that had, Okay, sorry about that. For a couple that had repeatedly killed each other in a dream, we actually had a pretty nice thing going.
面倒かけて申し訳ないです。
いいのです。そもそも誘ったの私だし、そりゃちょっといきなり北海道かよと思わなくはなかったけど。
マジですいません。
いや、ツッコミ待ちっぽいのを突っ込まないようにしようと頑張り続けた結果なので、ある意味私にも責任が。
その通りだ。ずっとツッコミを待ってたのになぜ止めてくれなかったんだ。
出た、高速手のひら返し。これがあるからなかなか素直になれないというのが分からないのか、この人は。
僕はあらゆるコミュニケーションにガチのエンターテインメントをインプリメントしたいだけですよ。
That is very important, that's true.
エルザスとロートリンゲンのこけしをコンプライアンスなレインメーカーしつつシカゴをカムチャッカするわけですね。
Wow, that's quite a series of my goodness.
そうかよ。
Oh, hello. A brown bear. A mature one weighed between 300 and 500 kilos. They were the apex of land animals in Japan, omnivorous but loved meat. Special skills, bear claw and bear hug.
確かクマは本来おとなしい動物だから驚かさない程度に騒音を立てていれば向こうから逃げていくはずだ。そう、例えば私、芹沢千恵みーちゃん、油が乗って美味しいよ。
Schwing.
痛い。その音がこの方を脅かす。
逃げろバカ。
Seeing Chimmy scream and run brought me back to my senses. Why was I joking around with a bear?
背中見せないで。背中を追う性質があるから。
ブリッジ走行したらどうなる？
いい加減見捨てるぞひねくれ人間。
ごめんなさい。
The bear was large enough that I had to look up to see its face. Standing up, it was over 3 meters tall. It roared and flailed its arms. Towards the bike.
バイクに興味示した。今のうち逃げるよ。
逃げるってどこに？
わかんないけど、とりあえず絶対止まんないで。
The young couple ran backwards through the endless forest.
あ、バイクこけた。
やめてくれ！
I ran. Once the bear was out of sight, I turned around and ran as fast as I could. I was the first one to run out of breath, but Chimmy was becoming exhausted herself. I was pretty sure we'd ran about 3 full kilometers.
ちょっと整理させてくれ。
You know, seeing these two interact, I'm starting to see. Well, I could start to see earlier, but I'm seeing more of perhaps why Mitsuji, he and Mitsuji did not gel that well together.
どうぞ。
僕らはヒグマに襲われたのか？
うん。以上かい。
ああ、ちえみのツッコミに生きている実感を覚えるわけでもさほどない。
さほどないんかい。ごめん春明さん。 いい加減疲労と緊張がサービス精神を上回りそうだわ。
ごめん。正直あの流れで突然クマが出るとか、タチの悪いギャグかなんかとしか思えなくて。
タチの悪いギャグでヒグマ繰り出すって、どんだけお笑い精神旺盛なのよ、北の大地。
正直、今でもあれをどう捉えていいのか。
ヒグマだよ。
ちょっとくらい立ち止まらない？
春秋さんはクマのヤバさを甘く見てる。奴らは気まぐれで変質的なハンターにもなり得るの。人里まで逃げないと。
Oh, hello.
それにヒグマがあいつ一頭だけとは。カメラはどこ？
The appearance of the second made Shammy lose her grip on the situation. I grabbed her by the collar and started backing away. The new one was smaller than the other, and it didn't seem all that aggressive. Was it a female? The way she tilted her head, it was actually cute. But this was actually a wild animal. She could probably kill us while thinking something like, oh my, what is this strange meat? Seeing the panicking humans before her made her realize the danger, and to us that was more dangerous than any moment in the Feast of the Yomi Purge. As we ran, the second bear chased after us. Were it a human, we could sing a song about bears and run off, but we wouldn't... Were it a human, we could sing a song about bears and run off, but that wouldn't work on this beast. As Shammy panicked, I calmed her down, then thought of a way to get out of this. Of course, there was a golden rule for getting away from a bear. I took off the bag off my back and threw it at the bear. Naturally, the bear followed it with interest, buying us some distance. Lots of it, even.
ここまで来れば。
Upon saying that, I realized I fucked up. I knew where this was going. Wait. How? This wasn't a manga or a game, right? There was no way that'd apply, huh? My thoughts were still in fiction creation mode. That had to be why I was acting so weird about this. Haha. I didn't have the energy to react anymore, so I just took Shammy's hand and ran. I hated TV culture and the humor of its comedians. Both would be useless in a fight for survival in the wild. They would just waste my energy turning decisiveness into jokes. I knew that was unreasonable, which seemed to show that I was saner than Shammy, at least.
私、生きて戻ったら、あらゆるドッキリ番組ロケとクマが出るアニメを潰して回ってやる。
She charged as fast as she could, and her voice was dense with madness and seriousness. Crap, I needed her to say sane. And no, I wouldn't destroy bear anime. Their lives would be in danger, especially the yellow one. Again? Something wasn't right here. We met bears no matter where we went, yet we were still alive. Incidentally, we'd left the road a long time ago and we're now lost in an unfamiliar forest. That made the likelihood of running into bears all that much higher. What the hell was this? Bear world? A trap of some kind? Were we being chased to our deaths? Oh, if only we had God to help us this time. However, her holy land was hundreds of kilos away, and the lord of the mountain where you only had moon bears would probably faint upon seeing these beasts. And she probably had bad chemistry with Chammy. Chammy had said that right after the incident she'd left Yasumizu and returned to college. Though she no longer thought that she didn't belong there, she didn't consider Yasumizu to be her ultimate home. Also, well, she probably cared about me too. That was why she got in touch with Mitsuji and became friends with her. Human relations sure were something. What I wanted to say was, that was the reason why I thought that she and God wouldn't get along, since God was basically tied to that general area. After that incident, Chammy had been able to settle the score with God and change her perception of the concept. However, that didn't mean that she could get along with her. Unlike her, I couldn't see God, but I figured that she no longer loomed over her. Oh no. As we ran around, not sure what was going on, we arrived at a certain place. It was pretty large. Half of it was basically a rock large enough to look up at, while the other half was countless withered trees, though they were just 2 to 3 meters long wooden sticks that were placed against the rock. The materials were natural, but the result sure wasn't. I felt a similar thing when I saw the Okiba. It seemed to blend in with the environment, but it was clearly something unnatural. I looked around, all alert. There were no brown bears around for the time being, but...
Haruaki-san,
あ
神様がいる。
あ。え
Chimmy looked at the structure with distant eyes. She then closed them, joined her hands, and bowed. It looked so extremely natural and spontaneous that I didn't know how to react. So I joined my hands.
使わせてもらおう。
え何なのここ。
昔、誰かが残したお家。
A home? I walked up and realized she was speaking the truth. All that running took us from a plain to a mountain area. The trees here were paired with large boulders. The largest rocks of them all canopied by an overhang of withered trees, had a little bit of extra space on the inside you could live in. The boulders and the withered trees were like a roof and walls. Of course, it did little against the wind and rain, but it could handle snow, probably. This might have been a winter residence. There was dried grass near the withered trees, too, and indeed, this did seem like a proper dwelling. The iron pan hanging on one branch made it clear that someone had been living here.
お邪魔します。
Unperturbed, Shepley promptly took off her shoes and entered. And then she sat down in the middle.
Haruakiさんも休もう。ここは安全らしい。
Apparently. Who did she hear that from? I'd ask, but I figured it was pointless. I then took off my shoes, which was probably some sort of gesture of respect, and sat down on the soft, dry grass. Though the only thing separating us from the outside were rocks and the withered trees, the inside felt a bit different from the outside. It actually felt like a peaceful place to rest. Boundary. That word came to mind.
敷居は結界じゃ。神語りは結界越しになさるがよい。
I'd realized, that the god in that incident that Chemi was afraid of was a kind of information-based organism. It was hard to admit it, but it had a human-like awareness and intelligence, though I wasn't sure about a sense of identity. Anyway, unlike other organisms, it didn't need a body, DNA, or any physical memory storage to sustain its life, its information. It used some way of recording itself in natural and artificial objects as elaborately concealed information. Then, when recognized by intelligent organisms, they would influence their consciousness and become manifest. Then the affected human would leave God behind in some way and spread, effectively living on. It reminded me of a famous horror novel, the one about the dead person who appeared on the Curse video. The movie version was famous for its representation of ghosts, but the theme of the original novel was the ever-spreading, evolving visual information. Video was itself a type of data too, and conversion flaws, editing, and changes in film were like DNA mutations. And the curse spread through fear by stimulating people's egoistical life functions. Since it couldn't multiply by itself, it made others spread it instead. In that sense, it was much like a virus. Viruses, too, were creatures without much besides their DNA. They were barely alive. So they hacked living selves and just copied themselves. What a hell of a survival strategy. God was like this too. The only difference was that God was righteousness and spread by manipulating people's need to be right as an intermediary. That particular God was a gathering of rules created over the centuries by people who feared the mountain. The mountain couldn't be looked down upon. Compared to it, humans were just dust. The mountain could bring forth the supernatural. The mountain was Yomi. Yomi was darkness. That was why she, through human and animal fears, could completely control humans and animals that acknowledged her. However, God wasn't almighty. Since gods were righteousness, or the state of being right, and prioritized what was right above all, they were bound by their own rules. The primary problem was residence. Though Japan wasn't too religious, there was a latent idea that there was a god living in everything. However, that meant that not everything in their lives was controlled by a single god. Eating, excreting, reproducing, working, sleeping, crimes, marriage, funerals, festivals, the idea that everything in life was controlled by a different god. That meant that the sphere in which a single god reigned, not necessarily physically, was extremely and strictly limited. The god in Haruchan represented the mountain, Yomi, darkness, and dreams. Thus, she couldn't manifest anywhere else as long as she continued doing what she considered was right. The place where it was right for her to be was the boundary. This place was probably a boundary for the god of those who lived here and built these dwellings. The ancient people of Hokkaido. The Ainu? I looked around the interior. There were old blackened sawdust-like decorations that I'd never seen in any other culture. I wasn't knowledgeable about this, but I could feel it in my bones that this had been left behind by the ones living here. We were receiving help from a different culture. It was best to think that the whole thing with the bears wasn't some natural gag, like that was a thing. I suddenly felt something on my right shoulder. Chimmy had closed her eyes and fallen asleep. She probably got too comfortable. Well, even bike passengers grew tired, and we'd been running around for so long I could totally understand her. But there was something unexpected. She could see gods that normal people couldn't see unless they manifested themselves. It used to be a scary, unnerving, and troublesome existence for her. She still wasn't able to explain it beyond the abstract feeling she had, but I could somewhat understand her. God survived by clinging to human instincts and leveraging them to reproduce. However, that action was only beneficial to the god, not the people. In fact, we'd recently dealt with a god that was warped so badly it made people kill themselves or others, though it had been distorted by the human work known as the Shinai faith. God had a mind of its own and could easily force the people into destroying themselves for its sake. Jimmy could actually see it. It was covering most people she knew, and that was surely a scary idea. I was sure I would have been scared. of and hated God if I was in her shoes. I wanted to set my own rules, after all. Jamie said that I had no God on me, and that was probably true. I had no sense of right and wrong. The most I could do was copy other people's righteousness. Being fixated on my own rules instead of what was right was probably my way of rebelling against God. But rebellions often failed, and that was why I'd end up housing God inside of me a few times. If I'd lived in that mountain alongside Rokako-san, I might have become a righteous person too. Though, with Rokako-san, I couldn't be sure. She might have infected me with her grotesque god and turned me into her demonic servant. That actually didn't seem that bad. I was pretty interested in destroying Japan with Rokako-san's sexy ass alongside of me. We did get to see that.
春秋さん、何に焼けてんの?
In one alternate reality, we did get to see that. Although, I think her bottom half was kind of, embedded in the rest of the spider, but, it is what it is.
ちえみの体温が嬉しくて。
その嘘がとても嬉しくない。
すみません。少々邪念に走っただけで、君がそばにいるのは本心から嬉しいです。
男の子ってば、まあ許す。
目が覚めた？
うん。夢見てた。
どんな？
ものすごいヒグマに囲まれて。
それ現実？
いやいや、夢でもヒグマ天国だったんだよ。でも、ちょっと違ってて、あんまり怖いとは思わなくて。なんか、ヒグマから話しかけられた。
What a fairy tale. I wanted to say that out loud, but I couldn't. In many cultures, dreaming was the right way to meet God.
なんて？
知らない言葉だったんだけど、意味は分かったんだ。彼を送ってくれって。
Him? Who? I did have an assumption, though. I also guessed why we were sent here. Or why we, or just her, were chosen.
どこに行けばいいのかわかる？
多分、
方法は？
Jimmy closed her eyes and searched through the dry grass spread out on the ground.
あった。
She took it out. A quiver. It was made of wood and leather, and there were detailed patterns carved on its sides. Inside, there were 3 bright brown arrows. The feathers were brown and white, probably belonged to a bird of prey. All that seemed too new to be relics.
こっちには弓もあった。
Jimmy took a bent wooden stick. It was also really elegant, and had an amber string at one of its ends. She skillfully bent it, picked up the string, and hooked it to the other end. And with that, the bow was complete.
君が使えるのは鉄砲だけかと思ってた。
いや、私もそう思ってたけど、なぜかわかるんだよね、やり方が。
That's creepy. She put the quiver over her shoulder, took the bow in hand, grabbed the string with the other, pulled it back, and released. A sound. I'd heard that playing with bowstrings repelled evil, but I wasn't sure if that applied here.
しかし、その弓と矢で彼を送ることはできるのかな？
I wasn't knowledgeable about this, but that bow and arrow seemed too weak for a proper battle.
毒を使うみたい。
毒？
うん。春明さんが一度死んだやつ。
Now that wasn't something I wanted to remember.
あった。
She crouched before some grass that had patches of purple in them.
トリカブト。
うん。あとは、マムシグサと松ヤニと川の虫の。川はないか。いいや、とりあえずそれだけで。
なんだかモッチーみたいだ。
そうかも。
Oop, sorry.
操られてるとかじゃないんだよね。
うん。ただ、さっきの夢でヒグマが教えてくれたような気はする。
I see. It was divine info, and I knew various ways through which it could be passed on. One example was the methodology behind the feast, which was too thorough for it to be word of mouth. I couldn't perceive the god here, or the bear dream Chammy had seen. That talent for seeing God might have been more powerful and profound than it first seemed.
僕が掘るよ。幸い、バイクのグローブをまだ持ってる。素手でやらない方がいいだろうから。
大丈夫？
ああ。今回僕は手伝いしかできなさそうだからね。
え？いや、それは助かるけど、すっごく大事な役割もお願いしたいんだけどな。
I had no idea why, but I instantly understood that the role she'd give me was bad news.
とりあえず掘ります。
ありがとう。
Whatever. This was a good role split. After all, she was the hero who'd killed God. As I dug up the aconite, I realized there were brown bears watching over us from a distance. Just watching, though, not closing in. We knew they meant no harm this time, so neither Chiemi nor I were afraid. I just understood that this was just the kind of place it was. I brought back the poisonous plants and we placed their extract in one of the plastic bottles. We then dipped the tips of 3 arrows in, creating the poison arrows. While we worked, Chiemi was whispering something as though praying. It was a prayer to the god of poison, one of the countless gods of Yao Yorozu. Yao Yorozu. I don't know. Her sincerity made it impossible for me to joke about, so I just silently watched over her. Honestly, I found her beautiful right now. Fantastical, even. I could almost imagine her wearing the ancient traditional clothing of the people who lived here. Other things came to mind were eagles, wolves, and blonde ninjas. Crap, that was just fiction. Begone, my weird delusions. Also, I had no business being in touch with any god. That wasn't in my nature. I simply wanted to be free from anything, god or not. tried to bind me and do whatever I could as a free man. In this case, that was...
というわけで、春明さんにはおとりになってもらいます。
そうだと思ったよ、昆虫症。
いやー、夢のヒグマさんが、あいつは別に死んでもいいから、的なことを言い出したときは、思わず笑ったわ。
どんだけ神仏に軽視されてるんだ、僕は。
Well, I could understand them, though. Anyway, I parted ways with Chammy and started looking around by myself. Though I was actually just carefully moving forward. This was an animal trail. The grass carpet here was thin, and the young trees siding it were like a fence, making it somewhat clear that it was actually a road, a beast path. Body odor, reek of excreta, remains of hair, claw marks. It had plenty of info for you to conclude that this was beast territory. Unfortunately, we humans weren't sensitive enough to catch such hints. Thus, it was easy for us to get lost on the beast trail. It wasn't meant for human feet, it led to the realm of the mountain god. However, I didn't feel like I could get lost here. The gazes of the brown bears at the sides kept me on the road. That meant I was on the right path. This was the path once crossed by the god we'd hunt. Jemmy was hiding about 100 steps behind me. Now I just needed to wait until it showed up. Still nothing. I'd been walking for about an hour. It was actually getting to me now. Was Jimmy still behind me? Hell, was the divine mission she'd been given even right? What if we had to do something completely different? Like, sacrifice me, for example. Well, I really didn't think I was hated enough to become a target right away, but still. What if our positions were actually reversed? If it was me, leading someone stuck into Hokkaido into a super dangerous scenario, then, as they somehow survive, cracking a smile telling them it was just a prank, man, that would be fun. Crap, I was actually worried right now. I wasn't sure if I could survive if someone got back at me for what I usually did. I turned around and headed 100 steps behind me, to Chemi. She wasn't here. She actually abandoned me. I shouldn't have trusted her so easily. Right, she said she'd be my enemy. Our relationship was all about who could fool the other more. What was I to do now? How could I survive this? I heard a growl behind me.
背中見せないで。背中を追う性質があるから。
So that was it. Ha ha ha. Basically, I was going through one of those myths where turning around meant defeat. God's passage showed its true form when you turned away, and I had just turned around and walked about 100 steps to find Chemi. My back had been exposed to the anomaly. Knowing that it was too late, I faced forward again. What I saw there was a way too large brown bear, covered in a black miasma. This was definitely the boss. This evil aura, those shining eyes, the bloodlust it emanated from every part of its body. It stood on its hind legs and swung its two giant claws at me, making me jump backwards. The trees, young and dead, as well as the earth beneath, went everywhere. My flesh wasn't among the stuff, yay! But the monster's specialty was going on all fours. Upon realizing it missed, it got down and charged at me, and I was unable to get back up. My death was imminent. I'd solved such a major incident, and now I'd die to some bear monster I met after going to Hokkaido on a whim? What kind of reader could tolerate this? Shit. Once I died, I would become a really annoying ghost and go around shouting lewd things around Shami Sarazawa. I should have already been dead, but I wasn't. So I opened my eyes. At that moment, the giant frame began to collapse. There were 3 poison arrows in it. The head, the shoulder, the stomach. With a tremor, the beast collapsed. And
春明さん、大丈夫だった？
Chimmy appeared next to me like it was no big deal.
いたんだ。
そりゃあね。
いや、100歩後ろをついてくるって話だったのに、100歩進んでも全然いないから逃げられたかと。
そりゃあ、合わせて100歩後退しましたとも。
いやいやいや、突発的なトラブルかもしれないじゃないですか。いきなり連絡が取れなくなったら不安じゃないですか。そうやって僕が不審に陥り、この道を逆にたどるのを待ってたってわけですか。
えへへ。
This little
いいじゃんいいじゃん。ギャグギャグ。敵同士敵同士。ブラックな信頼関係。そんな春明さんが大好きだよ。
予想してたことをまとめて言った挙句、ど卑怯な手でごまかさないでほしい。
そんなん言ったら逃げ出したかもって本当に疑った春明さんにも文句言いたいかも。
僕じゃなくても1時間森の中でさまよわされたら不安になるっての。
あ、ごめんごめん。春明さん、この件は後にしよう。ちょっとお仕事が残ってる。
というと？
Wait, were we completely ignored by all the other brown bears still around us? Was that a problem?
まあ、後でまとめて話すから。
She reached into her coat's pocket and took out a useful little tool, a hunting knife.
春明さんは見ないであげて。多分、それなりに苦しいところだから。
Chimmy had surely gone on to dismantle the giant bear. I knew from the incident that she knew how to do that. I had no idea why this action was significant. However, at this point, I didn't believe that she was doing something she shouldn't have. If that were the case, the brown bears watching over us wouldn't just sit by. And I also figured that me not watching the act was an important part of it. I was an outsider whose only role was bait, so I wasn't allowed to see the sight behind me. It took a long time. 30 minutes? An hour? Maybe a lot less than that, but honestly, actual time didn't matter here. It took as much time as it needed to. I spent the whole time waiting.
終わったよ。
Upon hearing that, I finally stopped acting like a statue. Damn, did my joints hurt. Once I turned around, I saw no sign of the ominous brown bear. There was only the large wooden stick. It was taller than me, and at its tip it split into two, and held up a pure, white, beastly skull like a weather vane. I vaguely understood that this was the result of her killing a god.
帰ろう。
I heard brown bear grunts in the distance, and it felt like they were urging us to come with them. Chemi led me by the hand for a few minutes, and we made our way out of the forest surprisingly easily. The bridge I'd mentioned before had a bus stop and a phone booth nearby, so I used it to call road service. We got in a road servicer's car and returned to my bike, which strangely wasn't collapsed at its side. In fact, even the bag I'd thrown back at the bear chasing us was hanging on the handle. I looked at Chemi's face, but her eyes seemed to be looking at something else. We then returned to a repair service in a nearby town and checked the damage. It was actually an early failure, and there was going to be a recall soon, but I needed it to work, so I just paid to have it fixed. Fortunately, they had spare parts, and the bag containing my wallet had returned to me, so I had no trouble fixing it.
結局、あれは何だったんだろ
知りたい？
う。超知りたい。
ね、ヒグマは毛皮と肉を携えて人の元へ来てくれる神様みたいなものなんだ。そしてここの人たちはヒグマの子が手に入ったら大事に育てた後、大きな宴会を開いてその子をほふった。それは自分たちに恵みをくれた神様への感謝とともに、神様を盛大に神の世界へと送り返す儀式だったんだ。だけどあの子は送ってもらえなかったみたい。
なぜだろ
わからない。送るべき人がいなくなったっていうのはヒグマたちが言ってた。 だからあの子はずっと神の世界へ帰ることもできずにどんどんおかしくなっていってしまったんだ。このままだと人を傷つけて悪い神になってしまうから。だから送ってほしいってヒグマたちはそう言ってた。
ふーん。なんだかな。
おや、ご不満が？
幻想物語としては面白いけど、熊殺しを正当化してるのは人間本位の神話設定でしょ。それを熊の方から望むってのはどうもな。
それはちょっとチエミークスプレインがまずかった。どっちかっていうとヒグマたちは人間の残した責任を果たしてくれと言いたかったんだと思う。かつての人たちが自分たちの神様のもと捕まえ縛りそのままにした仲間を解放しろって。
なるほど。それならま
あ。あと分かってるでしょ春明さん、あの場にいたのはみんな神様だよ。
I had a hunch. The forest itself wasn't human territory, it was an area close to the world of gods. Otherwise, we'd have been the main dish at a brown bear banquet. When we'd left the forest, Chimmy no longer had her arrows or quiver. Those things probably didn't quite belong to this world. We probably couldn't find those dwellings ever again either. That was probably a place created by the nostalgia of those who'd left, for some reason, leaving behind the brown bear cub. Well, looking at it from the god theory standpoint, the information in our minds had probably been manipulated to suit their needs. That had to be it. No doubt about it.
あの神様たちはぐちゃぐちゃした変な形してなかったし怖くはなかったな。
でもあまり近寄るべき存在じゃないんだろうね。
そうだね。それはその通りだ。
あれ、その手首。
There was something unfamiliar on Chammy's wrist. It looked like a bracelet made of a fur-like material.
あれかな？俺？
毛皮と肉をたっぷり置いていくことはできないからか。
かもね。しっかりした作りだし意外とおしゃれかも。
熊皮系女子。
それはやめて。
ただちょっと想像してしまった。
何を？
これから行く先々で君の力に目をつけた土着の神様どもから面倒事をいろいろ押し付けられて、そんでその度に新しい装備品を手に入れてどんどん現代離れした格好になっていく知恵みの姿をさ。
That worry wasn't quite unfounded. Chemi had been born as the child of the snake, and was exiled because of the corruption of Yomi. She's still on the screen. That's kind of weird. It's kind of creepy. Her specialty as a girl from that family that watched over things might have merged with her fear of God to let her see the God. She'd started out as a ruffian born in a harsh environment, but eventually she learned things, became strong, and grew up into a fine woman. Not to mention she had a hell of a weapon. Her origins, talents, career, fighting prowess. She was a perfect hero for a story of a god killer. This reminded me that she had also retained memories from previous loops during that incident. She could carry her memories over to the next time without borrowing the Zidger's powers. This is the last question I had. This is the thing I wanted to know about. Okay. That was probably the result of her god killer talent, giving her that ability as the most important weapon in that endless loop. Huh. She resisted, chased down, and eventually killed God, and her weapons were the memories from her previous loops. She herself couldn't use this ability properly, but with my planning, she was able to kill God. Chemi was now a real hero, and as such, she was probably in for a strange fate. That was what I was worried about, and made me wonder whether I had the right to stand at her side.
やめてよ。なんか冗談になんない気がする。
そうだよね。
I played it off as nothing, and thankfully she didn't notice.
でもちょっと面白いかも。エキゾチックな謎グッズまみれになってゴッドハントの大暴れってか。
神殺し姫とか言って映画化希望。
こいつはどえらい中二病。
なあ、あの200メートルほど先からものすごい勢いで走ってくる存在は何か追加の要件でも言いに来た神様かな。
多分普通の凶暴化したヒグマだと思う。
グマだー！グマが出たぞー！警察呼べ！マタギを呼べ！気分かむいよ！静まりたま
逃げよう。
え！逃げよう。
And so we'd experienced another divine, paranormal, incomprehensible scenario. Shimi Sarazawa, the hero, had gained some XP, and I, who lived in reality, didn't quite like it. Though, if our journey continued, I would soon become unable to deny it. And oh man, that was so scary I couldn't bear it. And... Alright. Alright, that was quite something. And yeah, it looks like if they're all similar amount of time, then it should be 4 more episodes for this. Alright. That was kind of interesting. Nice little one-off story. Yeah. Give me, before I start the next one, let me digest it a little bit, and then maybe I'll have some more comments about it before moving on. In any case, I've been The Worm, this has been Raging Loop, beginning of the extra stories. Hope to see you next time. Bye-bye.